last Monday at the Friends Meeting House in Rochester. The talk started out with mentioning a comment that was recently made about the way we work. It was during a talk given on the West Coast. And then quite a bit of discussion ensued afterwards, after the talk, and also during meetings during the week. People came to see me about that. So we will take this whole thing up again and add other things that have come up since. What had been said about Toni's way of working was, you take everything away and don't give anything back. You leave one nothing to work with. There is no generosity, was the verbatim, in leaving one something to work with. I'll first read everything that I noted down that we could discuss today. Whether we'll get to it is another question. Somebody brought up, not in connection with this at all, that a poem from a Buddhist scripture that she had heard years ago first kindled her interest in meditation. And that poem, which maybe many of us remember, goes like that. All composite things are like a dream, a phantasm, a bubble and a shadow, are like a dewdrop and a flash of lightning. Then someone commented after the talk, aren't you imparting a value in your talks? Never mind you saying you're not giving anything and there's nothing to give. You are indeed, aren't you, imparting a value with your very intensity of speaking, your body language, the person said. Imparting the value of seeing clearly, the value of seeing the truth, and thereby you're giving something to the listeners. It's not a question of not giving anything, you are. Or aren't you? I think there was a questioning in that statement. And another comment was, see, we had been also reading from a long letter of a person who had been for 9 years or 7 years doing Tibetan practices of concentrating on mantram and similar practices, then gone to a retreat and was now questioning, was there a value to reciting mantram or not? Where he could clearly see that there was effect on the state of mind. It became more calm in the course of chanting a mantra, more equanimity, and yet, as you mentioned, not a loss of the sense of self. So isn't there something that we can do, something that we can practice? And we discussed that at great length last Monday, and somebody commented later on, doesn't a mantram actually sharpen the sensitivity, the acuity of the senses, so the senses can see clearer, more clearly, perceive sound or sight more clearly if there is a practicing of a mantra. Then my question, which I also mention, is, why are we doing this work? What do we want? Sharper senses? More acuity in hearing and listening? Calming down the agitated self when it gives us pangs of fear, anxiety, restlessness, upset, have something to calm that down, for which there are all kinds of practices which have effectiveness. They work temporarily, maybe. In a limited way, in a limited area, they work. Is that what one is after? Or is one interested in finding out how we get upset? What is really going on in the mind and body in our moment to moment living and interrelating, which causes this endless upset that then we have to calm down, or fear which we then have to quieten or distract ourselves from. Is that our deepest interest, to find out what creates our suffering? Who is the sufferer? Why do we live in sorrow? Human beings, the world over, throughout history. And is that inevitable, unchangeable? Human nature, where we just do patchwork here and there with methods which become more varied every year, every week, new ways of calming the mind or soothing the senses or sharpening them, expanding the consciousness. And someone who's working on staff made this remark in a group discussion. After having been on staff for a while, maybe 1 or 2 years, I'm not quite sure, retreats don't seem just the same as they were when I came in from the outside. Just came for retreat and the intensity of it, the efficaciousness of it, taking something along for a while, something lasting for a while. And it seems being on staff, this isn't the same anymore. So many associations with what one is in touch with from one's daily life, living here, sleeping here, working here, recreating here. So does the mind get jaded? Because it feels as though if I left this place, I would get a new perspective on this place, on retreat, which I seem to have lost while being here day in, day out, getting used to the place. Not, I like it here, the person said, I think it's wonderful, but something doesn't seem to be the same. So here we're wondering, what is happening to the mind from moment to moment? That we feel this jadedness, this layer of dust or cover, which we feel by going someplace else, doing something different, getting a distance, will vanish and there'll be a freshness. We're wondering, what is freshness of mind? Freshness and lightness of mind, a lightness that is not weighed down with memories. This reminds me of that, and this is unpleasant, this is pleasant. And everything reminds me of something. I can't see anything fresh because everything is associated with memory. Or reminds me of what I have to do, what I should be doing, and therefore unable to be in touch with what's happening right now. What is sort of the essential, quintessential question that emerges from all these questions and comments and statements? What's going on right now? Can there be some listening? Maybe waiting for something to be said, something to be continued or brought up or explained, that state of expectation, which can be felt when it's there throughout the body. One is expecting something, expecting to hear something or to listen to something, see something, which is fueled and nurtured by the desire for something, wanting something, to feel better, to help one out, to take back to work or to the home. Is there this state of expectation right now? Wanting to find out what this place is all about or what this person who's talking has to say. Is there that state of anticipation, of wanting? Can the mind be open to whatever state it is in? And listen to what else is there. Flooding light of the sun, the warmth of it, and the sound of the wind, the bending of the trees, the whistling, sometimes a creak in the woodwork, flapping of some shade or shingle. One doesn't have to know, but can the awareness be there? Or let's say, can everything that's there be there as it is? If one wants something from it, clarity or insight, or losing that sense of wanting, can that very wanting something of be seen, be felt, and therefore it can wither and melt? What is it that keeps the mind jaded, so it is not in touch? And yet gives rise to thoughts, if I was here or there, doing this or that, practicing a new or an ancient practice, then maybe this mind would clear up. Remember. People often say this. I wish I could remember. Why do I always forget? But what is remembered is always a memory. And it's still a cover. wanting to remember, wanting to wake up, wanting to be in touch. Can there be an instant of listening or looking without wanting anything? The wanter discovered, seen, and therefore quieting down. Because the wanter is thought, I want that. Imagining, I could get that. Hoping, I may achieve that. That's the wanter. That feeling of there being somebody who can get something if he or she only wants it badly enough. And that covers up the sunlight and the sound of the wind and the squishy grass underfoot, half frozen, half melted. That's there whether we want it or not. But wanting something of it, we don't see it, we don't feel it, we don't hear it. Or wanting it the way it was a year or two ago is evoking holograms inside the brain. Somebody said that recently. I've often wondered, what is it, how we see inside? If we remember, let's say where we grew up, we can see that, the house or the room where we grew up. Somebody said, well, there's a hologram in the brain. Well, the word doesn't help too much. But there's something going on that produces some kind of an image, not as clear as if we stood right in front of the house where we grew up. But we can see all the features, remember them. But that screenplay inside the brain is not the real thing. It's neither what is remembered, nor is it what's going on right now. Does one see that? And wanting to feel as one did a year ago, does that, in fact, cover up the sensations of what is happening now, the feeling, listening, hearing? Even imagining how the next retreat will be, because other retreats that one remembers have been in such and such a way, therefore the next one may very likely be the same. All of that is the constant movement of memory projecting itself into the future. And we live in that stream. We are bathed and soaked in it, drowned in it. Of what was, what is, and what will be. And because we're caught up in that stream, we don't feel the floor underfoot, the air hitting the cheeks, the face as we walk outside, because we dream about what could be or what was or what should be. Do you see that? Somebody says, what are you giving us? You're not giving us anything, you're just taking away. And yet we love this poem, which expresses so poetically, so beautifully and simply, austerely, what each moment of living is like. A dewdrop. A dewdrop doesn't last. It's a curly, shiny for a moment and then it rolls off. It's gone. sun comes out and it evaporates. A bubble. The lightness of a bubble, nothing in it. Just some reflection on the outside, reflecting whatever is around it. And then it bursts. It's gone. A phantasm, we've talked about that. What we are, what we should be, what we could be, what we were, as all fantasy. Or what our mate or friend or imagined friend could be, should be, isn't, was. All fantasy. And a flash of lightning. A flash of lightning and then darkness again. Surrounded by darkness. For a moment, everything lit up. I'm thinking right now of a flash of lightning in the dead of night. Amazing. Everything is visible. Completely visible for a moment, and then darkness. We treasure poems like that. But they're sort of in a department by themselves. Because if one goes to a talk, one wants something to take home, something to work with. Why not work with that bubble, that dewdrop, that flash of lightning, which we are? What else do we need? What else is there to see and to shed light on, to be aware of, to understand, and from the surface through all the layers to the very depth, over and out, all the way through? What more is there to understand? If one was really to understand oneself, whatever that is, one begins by abdicating theories about it, ideas about it, poetic or otherwise, scientific, psychological, and starts from scratch by observing one's moment-to-moment feelings, symptoms, agitations, wishes, hopes, annoyances, anger. Enjoyments, pleasures. To be aware of that, not just tossed about by it, dragged along or pushed by it, pulled, but aware, wakeful for a moment. And not caught up in that moment of wakefulness, in that moment of awareness, an angry thought arising in all the emotions and feelings and sensations that one angry thought can pull in its wake. Wake is not, it's there with one angry or one fearful thought, one anxious idea, and boom, the whole body responds fully. Can one listen to that as to a full orchestra? As to the wind and the sound of the ice cracking underfoot. Then what is lacking in terms of things to work with? All the human misery and problem since time immemorial is walking, sitting, sleeping, waking, in each one of us, every moment. Not in the other guys, not in the world out there, but in oneself. We constitute this world. with our problems, our fears, our endless dissatisfactions, and wanting something better or different, and then not getting it, or getting it and wanting more. That's the stuff that we're entangled in, worried about, suffering from, aching with. Why look for something else to work with? Because we don't want to look. Somebody called up on the phone yesterday, wondering whether to come to a retreat for the first time here. In the beginning, having all kind of qualms about what goes on in a retreat, that people don't smile. This person heard people don't smile at each other, and wishing one had a joyous practice here. The person hasn't been here yet. I would rather be at a place where there is a joyous practice, where people smile at each other, and we talked at length about the learnedness of learnedness, the conditionedness of most of our smiling at each other. So rarely is there really spontaneous laughter or smile which doesn't come out of, I want you to like me, or I want you to feel all right, I want you to feel that I like you. All of these schemes that we have, which make us smile, but it's always half frozen. It can be learned, as an actor can learn to smile even though the heart breaks. So after talking about this and maybe, I don't know, clearing up some of the ideas that they may not be what is actually going on, then the person said, I don't really think I want to look at myself at this moment. It seems too painful. I've been through so much pain. And that's not really what I think I want to do with a free week or half week. So, shall we look at why it is so difficult to look at oneself? Is it because we have all of the moralistic, glamorous, or whatever ideas about what we should be like? Having worked on our image all of our life, and afraid of looking directly without the image, or seeing that what we are, what we think we are, is imagery, phantasm, dewdrops and bubbles. Seeing that, and then wondering what is there. Seeing that there is greed, that there is violence, there's anger, there is pettiness, self-centeredness every instant of our life, almost every instant. I think if one was able to see that as the human mind, not as an excuse or rationalization, but as a fact, that this is what is under investigation and what is discovered and looked at, maybe shuddered at, is the human mind. Not just mine, Tony's or Debbie's or John's. But this is what this mind and body is like when it's looked at without phantasms. If one didn't take it personal, because if the moment we say, oh, this is me, then we either beat ourselves or ignore it. Go back to the image of, or try to produce one immediately to show we're not like that. Pretend. But if there is insight that this is how this mind works, this is how it operates, and now it's seen, then we'll keep looking and to keep discovering, and in the discovery there's joy and relief, because what is really seen doesn't have to run mechanically and automatically and darkly and ignorantly. It's seen. It doesn't have to be this way. So at this moment, the question comes up, aren't you, in your intense way of talking about seeing clearly, seeing the truth about oneself, the truth about the human mind, aren't you trying to convince us that this is of value in life? I'm looking. Are you looking too? I don't see there was any motive to convince you of a value, but there is great intensity and passion in looking what is actually going on. Seeing that if there is no clarity, we go bumbling on. There is automatism, there is mechanicalness. It runs that way. The mind operates that way. The brain and the body function mechanically when there's no direct clarity, direct insight, and the intelligence of that. There was a woman once, I don't know whether she's still alive now, kept alive for 9 years or so on respirators and machines, and then even those machines were turned off and the body kept alive. The body, brain, all the mechanisms of it can function without this awareness that we're talking about, completely automatically. But in these automatisms, in this mechanicalness, there is, watch it, I'm not trying to convince you of it, observe it for yourself. There is self-centeredness, wanting to feel good, to feel better, to get one's just due, or to get a vendetta in. It starts as little children already. And this is going on in every human being that lives automatically, looking out for oneself or for whatever one is attached to, family or group or nation. And since there are uncountable individuals, groups, families, and nations, therefore uncountable different desires and wants and needs, we're on a constant collision course with each other, causing conflict to each other and to ourselves. This is not something I'm trying to convince any of. Everybody can look and see that for himself or herself. To see the truth of this moment, how we live, think, act, fantasize. Is that a value to see the truth of that? Or is that just seeing the truth of it? Or is that just the way we communicate with each other, saying this is of value to me? I feel there's something extra in that. It makes it sort of into an opinion. this is of value to me, but something else is of value to somebody else, and it's kind of hard to reconcile all of our values. And maybe if you took my values, then we would get along. But this is not what this is all about here. It's not for anybody to take on Toni's or anybody else's values, but to see for oneself. And maybe in this seeing, in the clarity of seeing, when it comes not out of self-centeredness, but out of what is actually factually going on, in that seeing there is intelligence. And intelligence is not a personal affair, not having to do with one's personal makeup or experiences or learning or IQ or mental ability. It's the intelligence of seeing what is so, which has no personal characteristics. It's something that can function any place, at any time, regardless of personality or opinions. It doesn't function when we're full of opinions. Then that functions, the battle of opinions and values, trying to convince each other which one is better, and never coming to agreement. Either one becomes converted, but then one is in disagreement with those who are not converted, and one goes out to convert them. But this is not intelligence of insight, which is precisely there when opinion and idea and fantasy and individual value is seen for what it is, arising out of learned, remembered past experiences and thoughts. You could say, listening to a talk, I see the value of seeing clearly. Or does one see clearly? Seeing the value of it is thought, picking it up and reflecting upon it. And thinking about it, how necessary it is, and how good it would be, and so forth. But that's still not seeing, it's thinking about the value of it. Talking about practices like mantras, a repetitive sound produced inside or outside. One person said, maybe that repetitive sound produced inside or outside can actually sharpen sensual or sense acuity. The acuity of the senses. And people have said that to me. This person who wrote the letter mentioned that after maybe chanting a mantra for 10 minutes, something happens. There's more wakefulness or sharpness in the mind. Maybe a certain color is seen, and that gives a certain energy. That's so. If that is so, then one sees that this is so. And if one feels lack of energy or depression, or the senses feel so dull, so one chants a mantra, and now one feels better, less depressed, more aware, more clarity in seeing, sharpness. What is there to be argued about? If this leads to that, that's a fact. One can test this out for oneself and experiment with it, repeat it, and what difference does it make if somebody else says, no, it isn't so? One finds out for oneself, yes. If I feel depressed and I chant or count from 1 to 10 over and over, after a while I feel better. That fact for someone who does that and finds this is so is incontestable, isn't it? No matter what somebody else says. What we're asking here, and nobody has to take over a question. We're not trying to impart or give questions. We're just right now questioning together if we wish to. Does feeling better, feeling sharper or more awake, shed light on why we feel depressed and dull and tired so much of the time? Does it shed light on what's actually happening to bring that about over and over again, even though we do have practices and systems and exercises that sort of perk us up and then we perk down again? What's happening? Is it that after we perk up we feel so good and we feel so successful, and then we're into praising to ourselves the efficacy of our mantra, our system, trying to propagate it, convince other people about it, or just feel good at our own progress and success, which means all of that while helping with depression or feeling of dullness also strengthens the sense of self, of me, being a successful operator who can do something about herself or himself. Which may be true, we said that. It may be actually so, one can, by thinking of a practice, using it, feel better. But who is the user? Who is the thinker? Who is the sufferer? And the one who feels successful and making progress? What is that? And is that itself at the bottom of our depression and suffering? That being somebody and needing to remain somebody or become somebody better all the time. It's going on all the time in this human mind if one watches. Can that be seen? And if one is into that and wants to discover that and see it, feel it out, what is there, then one will shove a mantra aside. We talked about it last Monday. If one wants to listen to the first song of the bird on a day of spring, one will not turn on the radio. Because clearly that masks the sound of the bird. Somebody said to me, well, why not listen to the radio too? What's wrong with that sound? Is that a worse sound than the sound of the bird? It's not a matter of worse or better sounds. That what wasn't mentioned. The example wasn't given to point out better and worse sounds, but to say that if one needs to listen to something, one doesn't want to mask the listening process. Because if there's a bird singing and a radio blaring someplace, can that all be heard without any judgment? Without any resistance or opposition or feeling victimized by the radio? Albeit it can have noticeable impact on the nervous system. which if it's turned off, there's a relief from that. That's factual. I was listening to something when we were sitting earlier before the talk. There was something going on which may be the fan that keeps the heat circulating in the room. It's a very repetitive drone. Not very loud, but noticeable. And it takes the mind a while to even notice that it's going on. It's there. And actually the mind drones along with it. It sort of takes that drone over. It itself, a repetitive sound has that temptation to a mechanical drone, to drone with it. And once one becomes aware of it, one may not have to go along with it. The mind doesn't have to hum along with the fan. It can be quiet, but then the fan is actually heard. And if that fan stops, it's marvelous. I don't know why I say that. It's not a judgment. It's so. And it's still. And no sound of wind has the same effect as something mechanical, repetitive. The mind doesn't hum along with the wind. The wind is so changeable, so different. It's always new and different. But a machine or hum made by a machine sort of makes that mind, which is also mechanical, hum along very easily. And in that there is a certain drain. And jadedness is not the openness of hearing. Albeit, in humming along, there's a certain embeddedness, comfort maybe. One has something to do. I'm not saying that it's done intentionally. It wasn't intentional. Why are we so into repetitive practices? Counting, repeating, humming, chanting. Because of the effect that they have on the brain? What is felt as a calming effect? But it's still doing something. And it's not silence. Unconditional silence. Which doesn't want anything, no comfort, no lulling or a lullaby. But feel the pain that's there, if it's there, the discomfort, without resistance, without the thought it shouldn't be, so I should do something about it, be done with it or rid of it. Just feel it. There's real freedom to do that. We don't have to escape. The mind offers it mechanically. The brain can do it mechanically, so one has to become aware of our mechanical escapes. Because the brain can do that without our saying, I want to do it. It just does it. Produces a hum. But if there's awareness of it, then everything can be there as it is. Even if one thinks it'll kill one. That's a thought, that's a fear, that's an anticipation, which may have no basis in fact. It's also a marvelous thing to discover all these fears that we have. What if I really feel this pain or this discomfort or anxiety? What will happen to me? And usually something worse, it'll get worse. We have a tremendous amount of assumptions which are unfounded, never tested out, but we just hum along with them. To become aware of our underlying tacit assumptions, and in that awareness, air them and maybe be free of them and try out whether it's really so. One person told me this. One person had a tumor, and I wasn't sure whether this was malignant or not. Wasn't sure. The tests weren't in. Tumor was taken out, but it hadn't been evaluated yet, properly analyzed. And this person said for the first time, he came in touch with a deep underlying assumption that he would live forever. And this was gone now. But this assumption had been there unawares, and one had based a lot of thoughts and way of living and behaving on that assumption. So can we become aware of our underlying assumptions and question them, air them with this tremendous spring wind and sunshine blowing and shining right through? Because even though assumptions seem to give us comfort, it's a bubble, a dewdrop of phantasm. So what are we at this moment when we have no assumptions about ourselves? Not wanting or expecting anything, not humming along with anything, just the vulnerable openness of not knowing, and therefore listening and looking. Being there as one knows not what. Not needing to be this or that, or becoming this or that. Then what is there?